Welcome, everyone. As you're joining, we'll give everyone a second to log on. But this is the Junior Library Guild Mystery and Adventure Webcast. So as you're joining, you'll see that there is a poll question coming up. So we ask that if you have a second, go ahead and answer that poll question. We'll get to those a little bit later in our presentation. Also, if you are in the chat, just let us know where you're from. It's always kind of fun to see where everybody is who's joining our webcast today. So as everybody's getting settled into the webinar, I just wanted to do a quick introduction. So this is the Junior Library Guild Mystery and Adventure webcast for this Friday, almost afternoon, I think for some of you, afternoon for me here on the East Coast. We're going to be talking to the four-time gold standard author, Wesley King, and his newest title, Benny on the Case. He's also a New York Times bestselling author. Not sure what's more exciting to you, Wesley, the four-time Gold Standard Selection Author Award or the New York Times.
But Gold standard for sure.
Gold standard, exactly. So we're super excited to have you here with us today. So just for some quick housekeeping for the folks joining the call, this is recorded. If you want to see the captions on Zoom, you can do that at the Zoom control bar. We'll talk a little bit about at the end where you can access the webcast, but we're excited to be able to record this for you today. If you have any technical difficulties, feel free to go ahead and use the chat. We have someone on our team. Hannah is monitoring that, so let her know if you're having technical difficulties. If you do have questions, you can pop those in the chat. We may or may not have time to get those answered at the end, but it's always good to let us know if you have questions for Wesley. So we're going to continue on and just do some quick introductions. So we'll start with the star of today's webcast, Wesley King. If you want to do a quick introduction.
Sure. Yes. Hi, everyone. Wesley King speaking to you today from drizzly Newfoundland, which is the perfect setting for talking about this Newfoundland-based adventure today. I'm the author of 14 novels thus far. Some Junior Library Guild ones in the past. A World Below, O.C. Daniel. Some of you may be familiar with Sarah and the Search for Normal. I also wrote the #1 New York Times bestselling series with Kobe Bryant, the Wizenard series, which we wrote from 2016 to 2020. And I'm happy today to be speaking about Benny on the Case, which is near and dear to my heart and is based on a lot of my own personal experiences and set in my own community in my sort of adopted homeland here of Newfoundland. So I look forward to discussing that and to explaining what some of these ridiculous Newfoundland sayings mean as we get to them as well.
Awesome. And then Hannah from our team, who is doing all the behind the scenes work, but she's very much a part of our team. So Hannah, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm on the marketing team here at JLG, and I'll be the one behind the scenes today, helping out with the chat and keeping an eye on all of your questions. So happy you all can make it today. Liz, I'll throw it back to you.
Awesome. And I am Liz Duffy. I'm the Director of Collection Curation for Junior Library Guild. So my very talented team of selectors, they are the ones behind the scenes picking all of the great books that you're getting in your monthly boxes. So I'm happy to be here and happy to MC today's excellent webinar and book talk. Okay, so we're going to move on. Sorry, I'm having trouble with Canva. All right, so next slide. So we want to talk a little bit about Wesley, our guest of honor here. So tell us a little bit about your background and your Newfoundland roots, your journey to authorship, and books that you enjoyed as a student. And let me know when you're ready to advance some of the slides, because I know we have some great pictures on here too.
Sure, yeah. So obviously Canadian. I'm initially from Toronto area and moved out to Newfoundland about 5 years ago. So I'm not originally from here, but it's if you've ever been to Newfoundland or you've watched things about Newfoundland, it has a very distinctive culture, which we get to a distinctive sort of language. And that lent itself into this story because I knew it was a place that was, fairly screaming out to be a backdrop of a wonderful, unique mystery because it has a very specific dialect, a specific specific weather, and of course, as we're going to get to a little bit in time, a lot of intergenerational connection and friendships. It's a little bit less distant than some areas of the country, where I really think that's a fantastic thing to share with readers. In terms of becoming an author, I wrote my entire life. If any of you are familiar with O.C. Daniel, that was sort of semi-autobiographical. Growing up, I dealt with pretty severe obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety. So writing for me was always an outlet to get away from that. That led into pursuing a career in journalism. But while doing that, I knew almost immediately that I wanted to tell stories for kids. Well, must I say way back? I guess it is way back. In 2012, I published The Vindico, my very first novel, which was actually about teenage supervillains. That, fortunately for me, was successful enough to launch this career that I'm still doing. Hard to believe, but 13 years later now, with 14 books. So yeah, my journey to authorship was very much one of just following that passion for writing. And the main part for me, and again, this will come up later, is telling stories usually about underrepresented voices or about issues that I want to convey to kids and to young readers, but generally through the lens of either mystery or sci-fi or magic or something to sort of pull them in initially and then sort of convey that message subtly as we go. And depending on the case, it's very much in that vein. Another underrepresented character, of course, dealing with mosaic Down syndrome, and previous novels, again, I've dealt with OCD, depression, lots of anxiety filtered throughout. So that's very much the main part of my author journey so far. And next year I have 2 more novels coming out, including a illustrated chapter book and also my first adult novel. My adult debut is coming out next year too. So after all these years getting to that, we can go and advance the slide there as I talk about books I enjoyed as students. So some of the perks of going along, of course, I lived for a while aboard a sailboat. This is actually in Tunisia, North Africa. Wrote several books aboard that. Now that I remember, a very cluttered, untidy looking ship. You can tell I lived there by myself. But the one great thing about writing is it's enabled this ability to travel, to meet readers around the world, and to keep reflecting those perspectives back in the story. And the time spent in Tunisia actually led me to writing Salma's character in Benny on the Case, who's of Tunisian descent and moves to Newfoundland, which is certainly a clash of 2 worlds as I experienced myself. And I think there's still maybe a couple more here. I might be probably just sent a bunch of boat pictures. It makes sense. The only time I ever took any photos is that this is the Highlander in Pantelleria, Sicily. There again, this has been part of the journey. That boat is no longer in the picture. And these days, I've been writing mostly from Newfoundland. I said I've written 5 books over the last few years here. So, and quickly, as I remember that last part of the question, favorite books growing up. My all-time favorite book growing up was My Side of the Mountain. Jean Grey Guy George. That's sort of like a survivalist. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but a survivalist fiction. And then, of course, I was a huge sci-fi and fantasy nerd of all types. So Harry Potter, Star Wars, all the normal stuff. But I always say my absolute favorite was My Side of the Mountain. And I think we're leading into now. Oh, good. See how. Well, this is my dog Sawyer here, who really is my writing partner. He kind of keeps me on track, especially for break time, walk time. And then these are my brothers. I'm the middle child there on the right, and they actually inspired one of my most recent novels about Sandwich a Tree, which dealt with autism spectrum disorder. The youngest there grew up with autism spectrum disorder. So again, those are the types of themes that are always lent into these stories. And that was another school set mystery that was really focused on exploring ASD and sort of normalizing it. I guess that's sort of the way I always put it. There are never things, when I write it, it's not focused on, it's not something to be pitied. It's to normalize it and to build it as a part of the story and a part of the character, but not the defining aspect.
Love your writing
Oh,
partner
sorry.
as well.
Yes, I know that
we all need a good writing partner, furry friend.
That really is his haircut too. It's pretty good.
So one of our first questions we have about the title. So your main character, Benny, has mosaic Down syndrome and reminds readers that while it's a part of who he is, it's not the only thing that makes him unique, which is such an important message to be sharing with middle school and especially elementary readers. So What inspired you to share that message in this title in particular?
Yeah, so mosaic Down syndrome, I've had some personal experience with, and sort of was writing from personal connection. And it was, I think it's a very well, it's largely unknown, mosaic Down syndrome. So for those who don't know, it's only about 1 to 2% of those affected with Down syndrome, and generally um, is characterized by having some of the physical traits and some of the health aspects, but not always some of the developmental aspects. So for a lot of people with mosaic Down syndrome, essentially they appear as if they have normal, but the other types of Down syndrome, but the developmental sides are not there. So that's what Benny is, of course, one of his aspects of his character in this novel. So, yeah, I mean, the most important part of these stories I always find is I never want to write a story just about what a lot of society classifies as a disability, or and don't even like to use any of those words. Again, it's more about normalizing it and making it a part of their character. I use a lot of humor in these novels as well because the people that I know, because all these are based off personal connections, they're always facing it with such humor and of course and of course it's normalized for them. So essentially what this all started is I wrote OC Daniel to share the message of normalizing OCD, and the feedback and the response for that was um, really life changing. So that kind of led me to exploring more of these stories. Again, my little brother's story with Bud Sandwich and Tree, a few other family connections, and Benny on the Case again was a personal connection. This one all kind of I left anonymously because a lot of people also don't want to be featured prominently in acknowledgments, but I knew it was such an interesting aspect. So yeah, as far as what the message is, it's I guess I don't even always like to use the term empathy. It's just to look around and understand the varying perspectives around us, neurodiversity in general, and to know that these are not the defining aspects. I love when readers read about Benny, they think he's funny, they think he's smart, and they just think as one other aspect he also has mosaic Down syndrome instead of a character who is his mosaic Down syndrome. So I just
Mhm.
love stories that build that in.
Yeah, I love that. So we have some other books. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about some of your other books. I think that was the next slide. Hopefully I didn't.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, well, that's good. It's always good to throw in a few other books
Sorry
there,
about
but
that.
and I
Yeah.
was talking about OC Daniel and Sarah in the Search for Normal there. And again, I would say that they're sort of almost partner books in the same vein of stories about generally underrepresented stories and voices. OC Daniel, of course, focusing very much on my own story with obsessive compulsive disorder. Sarah in the Search for Normal is the partner book actually to OC Daniel, and she's also dealing with anxiety, depression, schizophrenia. So those are really focused on normalizing mental health awareness, whereas, of course, Benny and Butt Sandwich and Tree are more developmental disorders, essentially. So, but all in the same vein of stories, just featuring, again, these underrepresented voices. They're all mysteries. They're all sort of embedded with humor. And so all of these would be sort of um, a catch-all for the same group. If one of your readers likes mystery, they like a little bit lighthearted tone, but they're open to the messaging that these are all novels that would be good for them, I think.
I like that a lot because I think that it really resonates with younger readers now, or I think for any of us that are either have kids, work with children, know that mental health is such an important part of their life
Hmm.
right now. And it's so openly discussed with this younger generation of kids, which is amazing. I think,
It
I'm
is.
a child of the 80s and the 90s. We didn't talk about that in the 80s and 90s. So I love that you're through your characters, through your other titles, even through Benny, just talking about, mental health, neurodiversity, and just acceptance for being able to discuss these topics. So I
Yeah.
think that's a really unique aspect of your work. So no, it's much
Thank you.
appreciated
Thank
by
you.
educators, parents, librarians.
Right.
So
Right.
let's talk a little bit about Newfoundland. Thing here, and it's beautiful. You can't beat this picture. Um, so the second question is Benny on the Case. It's set in Newfoundland, which encompasses cold, wet days, whales, um, popping out of the sea, and a retirement home set next to a rolling cliffside, which sounds like an amazing retirement home. So
It does.
talk a little bit about that and the setting of Newfoundland.
Yeah, and again, so I actually moved here again about 5 years ago, and moved here. For those who don't know, this is, the furthest part of Canada, essentially, too. Even Canadians don't really know what's going on in Newfoundland half the time. I had not even been here when I initially moved here. And I did move to sort of a very large, rickety old home perched on a cliff. Really do have whales popping out of the water. So that setting all lent itself very directly to Starflower of the Sea. That's basically based on the home that I'm in right now. Um, and Newfoundland is also somewhat special in that it does have this sort of like private retirement culture where there are these little communities where there's 8 people in a house or 10 people in a house or 20, and there's still that it's not maybe commercialized in the same way as that industry is on the mainland. As now we call everything's the mainland when you live in Newfoundland. um, so that side of it lent itself, and for some reason I knew instantaneously that I wanted Benny to be in a retirement home. Uh, Growing up, I was exceptionally close with my grandparents. Mr. Tom in the book is based exactly on my Opa, German grandpa. His attire, his demeanor, everything that he does, fixing things together, that is 100% based on sort of how we grew up. Um, and then I also spent a long time sailing with a 76-year-old Scotsman. So intergenerational friendships were always a big part of my life. And I thought that was something that had really been lost when I was talking to a lot of students now. There seems to have been, I don't know if this is the advent of social media, that's all above my pay grade, but there seems to be a disconnect between the generations, maybe more than there ever used to be. So I really wanted to emphasize the joys of these intergenerational connections and maybe somewhat encourage readers to want to visit with their grandparents or want to visit. And again, my mom used to take us into retirement homes to do visits as well. So this has always been something that has been of interest. And then Newfoundland itself, it's a very lyrical, it's a storytelling culture. Everybody has a story. Everybody wants to talk. Everybody plays an instrument. When you get together at someone's house, 8 people bring a guitar and they sit around in the kitchen and sing songs and sing folk, sea shanties. So it definitely is a place that's like brimming with story, brimming with eccentricities sometimes. And so that all kind of came together for this story set in a retirement home. And it really let me use some of the language, the yes by we saw pop up, long may your big jib draw. These are all sort of Newfoundland sayings that are the chapter headings throughout. So I thought it was a fun way to share and probably confuse readers, across North America with these Newfoundland sayings. But it's such a great culture. And maybe, hopefully, it encourages a few readers to either want to come visit or to learn a bit more about the island as well, because we always love tourists in Newfoundland.
Oh, nice. I love it. And I like that I'm pronouncing it completely incorrect with Newfoundland. That was definitely
That's very common. No problem. Yeah, that's how a lot of people say it.
that was the tell from with Jersey accent. So that is a good segue into a couple of the poll questions.
Mm.
Hannah, if you want to put those up in the results, Wesley's going to talk through those because clearly I can't even say Newfoundland correctly. So there's no chance of getting those sayings correct.
All right, that's all right. That's all right. Yeah. So yeah, number one, what does the Newfoundland saying "Long may your big jib draw" mean? And that's maybe one of the more famous Newfoundland sayings. When there's the whole ceremony of being screeched in Newfoundland. That's part of the thing they say, "Long may your big jib draw." And this actually was a perfect tie, as I see now. But the correct answer is actually "Good luck and farewell." Hope you catch lots of fish today. I mean, it could be related too. The weather looks nice, but yeah, essentially, long may your big jib draw. The jib, of course, being your lead sail in a sailboat. So that's drawing a lot of air and it's sending you off well onto your way. So generally, it means good luck and farewell. And number two, this one, yeah, the Newfoundland saying, "You can't tell the mind of a squid." Where we have it there, and this one, right on. Someone or something unreliable or untrustworthy. That's definitely it. Yeah. So essentially, can't tell the mind of a squid. That'd be maybe the troublesome member of your family, I guess, would be the squid. And it is also hard to catch squid in Newfoundland. So for that 11%, that's a good answer too.
So for those of us that now want to be tourists, what time of year do we go? I'm assuming not winter.
Yeah, well, unless that would be its own special experience in Newfoundland. The nicest time of year is generally like August, September. Into October could still be nice. we have a very long late spring, so it doesn't even warm up here till about July generally.
Okay.
And then, of course, you have a disparate. I'm on the west coast of the island. The east coast would be like St. John's. That's if you picture Newfoundland, if you've seen something, the colorful houses all dotting the shore.
Mhm.
That's really the east coast. So this picture here actually looks very much like the west coast of Newfoundland. Lots of fishing culture, lots of seafood going around. So this is a good idea of Newfoundland right here.
That's awesome. Well, maybe you'll get some visitors, some additional.
Yes, please.
So the next question I have is Benny on the Case discusses difficult topics like ageism, racism, ableism, bullying, and end of life care in ways that young readers can digest. So how do you balance these heavy topics with a fun kind of page turning super sleuth detective case?
It's a great question. And yeah, it's something that has come up certainly in the past. Dealing with a lot of these books by their nature come with these difficult topics. I have touched on the past, certainly on racism and ableism and bullying, of course. This was the first time that ageism and end of life care has really been featured in one of my books. And a sensitive topic that is very topical up in Canada right now might be there as well. Um, and something that I really just found in my interactions with young readers visiting school, it just wasn't something that was thought about as much very often. I think again the culture now of very much in the moment and what's happening online and what's happening on my phone is maybe created a bit of a disconnect between that generation. But I think, you know, of course, educators, parents, they can address these topics head on, but in a book setting, if you're too on the nose with it, if it's focused too much on that, I find that the readers just drift off very, very quickly, at least the ones that I'm usually interacting with. So for me, it's always about creating a really engaging story, a really engaging character that they can latch onto and identify with. I think that's really, really important. Benny has to be a character that they can identify with. And so that's kind of how I think sometimes. And that's the kind of comedy that I like because it helps to put them into the story. So I think it's so important to try and get a page turning mystery and then to seed some of the messages that you want to get in there along the way instead of focusing on them on the outright. Um,
Mhm.
these are kind of let in, and Benny does deal with some sad and parts or some parts that might be emotional for readers, but there are also things that all of them have or will, of course, face in their lives. So if it can be done subtly and delicately in these stories, I just find it's extremely helpful. And again, that came back from OC Daniel when I put it out there and I was getting letters back that this was the first time I ever talked to somebody about what I'm going through. This prompted me to speak with my children. This prompted me to speak with my parents. So I just
Mhm.
find if it can prompt discussion in any way, whether in a classroom setting, whether at home, then the book did its job. And I also want them to, of course, enjoy it and get to the end and have a fun read. But uh, in this case, often the case, I really am focused on discussing the topics, but I'm just trying to find a way to make it digestible and fun and to make sure that they're, having a great experience as well.
I love that. Um, so our fourth question is about friendship and embracing differences, which are all themes that are in Benny on the Case.
Mm.
With both Selma and the new girl in town, with Tunisian ancestry, Mr. Tom, who is an 86-year-old resident at the Starflower by the Sea. So, how do each character's differences or strength contribute to solving the mystery? So that's quite a
Great
few
question.
characters.
Yeah, yeah. And these are the things that I mean, it's because it comes up so much through editing, and for those, probably some people listening have done writing and publishing, or they've got some familiarity with the experience. But of course, we write a first draft generally, and the first draft is almost invariably a mess. I know where I want to get to, and I know the people I want to get there, but everything that's happening along the way can be a little scattered. So one of the important parts as we went through draft by draft was A, identifying the characters, and then B, making sure that they all had a purpose in solving the mystery and that they all contributed in some way. Because I didn't want anyone to feel like they were placed there, again, just to perhaps tick a topic box instead of being an integral part of the story. So a huge part of this was through the editing process. And I think we did, I would say, 4 complete drafts of Benny on the Case before we got to the final. And actually, the title of the book, I'm diverging it slightly, but the title of the book all along was actually Goodbye Benny, B apostrophe Y Benny. That was the title I really was pushing for. But the publisher actually ultimately decided that that might have been a lot to initially pronounce for kids reading it. But because I was focused very much, without spoiling it, but on the intergenerational friendship and how that all sort of ends ultimately. But yeah, essentially in this case, so we have Benny, who is he's rejoining what he calls normal classes. He's been taught sort of aside until the beginning of this book, when he's at his urging and his mom's great reluctance put back into sort of the regular classroom. This is his reintegration, because he's always treated differently. And he's also meeting there Selma, who's actually coming from Seattle but has Tunisian ancestry, and sort of is visibly different, which in Newfoundland is not overly diverse. I mean, it's especially in the west coast of Newfoundland, there's almost zero diversity. So it would actually really stand out with a growing town with Tunisian ancestry comes into town, and it's slowly diversifying. But in these small fishing villages, this is very much something that would occur. They're both initially sort of ostracized a little bit. They find each other. And then, of course, we have Mr. Tom, who is, and this was actually important too. I wanted Mr. Tom to be sage and Mr. Tom to be a positive influence, but I wanted Benny and Selma to solve the case. I think in a lot of these mysteries, it's really important to have the protagonist, the young protagonist, solve the case, because I want readers to put themselves into that position. So really, Benny and Selma are pushing this along. Mr. Tom is there for support, and he's also the emotional core of Benny's journey of how he's becoming independent. This is basically also a story of finding his independence. For Selma, it's about coming to somewhere where, again, she feels like an outcast and finding her identity here. And then for Benny, yes, this is really him growing up throughout the course of this book, and this mystery, which is somewhat maybe unusual for a mystery for this age group, where it's dealing with some pretty big themes about retirement homes and possible fraud and corporate sort of espionage, but introduced in sort of an introductory way. And I'd be curious to see how many young readers are solving this ahead of time, because it's always a nuance of getting there. But I was kind of excited to bring a story. It wasn't just like something stolen, or it wasn't just a missing person. There was like a higher level to this. We're thinking about how white collar crime works, and how, you know, the corporations are taking advantage of small businesses. So this was just this little other aspect of this mystery. So I'm excited to see young readers integrate into that.
Yeah, it's such a unique plot and story, and I do love that you had said earlier that you didn't want to just tick boxes of characters and representation, and I think that you can tell on the page that the characters in their representation are so impactful for the reader, and they really tell a story that's unique and means something. It's not just this kind of superficial, well, there's someone from Tunisia, there's someone with neurodiversity. I think that that's something that stands out with this title, is how impactful those characters are throughout the story and to each other, in a unique way that's not just this superficial kind of friendship. It's meaningful. Right. And I think that's one aspect I really love about the story. So I think a lot of kids and probably librarians, parents, teachers, right, will also pick that up too. So okay, so we have some more pictures.
Yeah, I guess so. The quick interlude here. This is the Wizenard series. I don't know if this could be in some of the libraries around there. So this was actually in 2016 on the left. Kobe had reached out after reading O.C. Daniel. He wanted to write a book, again, a magical realism that was focusing on underrepresented stories. He really wanted to focus on boosting literacy in underserved communities as well. So that led us to writing the Wizenard series, which is sort of a down on its luck basketball team introduced to a magical coach who sort of makes them confront their fears and anxieties and social inequalities as well. So there's 2 novels in that series. A great experience. Very, very proud of it. Of course, tragically lost Kobe in 2020, but I know he loved the way that story came together, and it's a great one. I think for reluctant readers, maybe the basketball fans or the sports fans, it seems to Kobe's name helps them bridge to wanting to read the book, and then from there, I've seen a few really take off. Sometimes, as we all know, the right book can spur a whole love of reading that can be voracious afterwards. So, yeah, just as a little aside there, that's can be a good one for your reluctant basketball readers, maybe.
So now we have a little interactive 5-minute writing activity, Wesley, that you prepared for our audience. If you want to go ahead and walk them through what you like everyone to do.
Yeah, so you can either do this mentally, of course, or if you want to write something down, either pen and paper or write on your laptop. Essentially, these are just the 6 questions I use for actually building a story. So when writing, sometimes you can have that thunderbolt moment where an idea strikes you. A lot of the time when you are doing this professionally or long term, you're building stories and you're constructing them from the ground up. And part of that is knowing um, what you want to write, but how you want to present it. So I thought I would just share the 6 things I generally ask myself and why I kind of ask them. And I can give an example of how it literally led me to a book and kind of how that works. So again, you can write something down for this if you want. So the first question I always ask myself is, what is something I know very well? With bonus points for being something that is not well known by everybody, that is misunderstood a lot of the time, that I have to explain to people sometimes, or that I would like people to know more about. So that's how I always find the personal core of a novel. Um, it's always nice if it's important to you. It's always nice if it has some sort of passion or emotion for you. But again, the question is, what do I know very well? And you can come up with 1 or 2 things from there, of course. The second question after that, and I start this pretty early, is who do I want to tell the story to? Or who do I want to talk about this topic to? So is that kids? If it is, how old? Do I picture this speaking to really young kids with illustrations? Do I want to speak to teenagers? Do I want to speak to adults? When I establish right away who I want to tell the story to, that's going to lead me to figure out what kind of format, of course. It's going to dictate how I describe the characters and how I describe the setting. So again, we have what is something I know very well and who do I want to talk about it to? So we have our audience and our topic. Next, I usually like to either set the setting or I set my character. When I set my setting, I always ask myself, where is somewhere I know very intimately, or where is somewhere that I want to spend time? Because you're going to spend a lot of time. So if you're writing fantasy or fiction, or you're writing, let's say, international intrigue and spy fiction, then it makes sense to pick somewhere that you want to be, because you're not always going to have been to places in that case. But if you're telling something and you're really focused on authenticity, then the places that you've been or the places you are of course going to enable you to write about that a lot more effectively. So for me, it's always, where have I been, or where am I, or where do I really want to spend a lot of time? Because if you're writing a story, you're going to spend months or years in that area. So you better get used to it and you better like it. The fourth question I always ask myself is, what kind of book do I feel like reading? Or what theme do I need in my life right now? Because again, writing is, of course, an inherently personal experience. So it's always going to be reflective of what's going on in your life. So do I need a little comedy in my life? Do I want a mystery because that's just what I like to read? Do I need something inherently hopeful? Or am I okay in expressing maybe some darker emotions at the time? So it's always that question of, what do I want to read, or what do I need right now? That's the great part about writing, is we get to dictate our own adventure. We're choosing our own adventure, and we're choosing our own experience for the months and weeks or years to come in some cases. Finally, actually, sometimes I bump this one a little earlier. Actually, the second last one, sorry. This is the catch-all question that I'll explain because it sounds really weird. The question is, what's in my character's pocket on a Tuesday? And the reason that sounds so specific is because you really need to know your character intimately, inside and out. So when I'm thinking about my character, I'm thinking, A, is it me or some interpretation of me? Am I putting some part of myself into the page? Is it someone I like? If I don't, why should the reader like them? We have to sort of appeal to that. And then I need to know them so well that I actually need to know what's in their pocket on a Tuesday, sort of an inane question. But if I can answer that sort of instantaneously, then I know I have a truly fleshed out example of what my character is. I do think one of the easiest tricks or tips to writing a great story is to getting to really know your character well. And if you know them well enough, they're going to guide you throughout the plot. They're going to answer all the questions that you run into, and you'll know exactly. When I know Benny really well, I knew how he would react to every situation. And so that helps guide me as I'm writing my stories. And finally, this is important. What's my goal for the story? Is it to publish it? Is it personally for me and my family? Do I want to try and be a #1 New York Times bestseller? You really should establish right away what the dream is for the novel or what the point is, because that's also going to dictate approach. If you want to be a #1 New York Times bestseller, you're probably going to have to follow a little bit more formulaic approach. You're probably going to have to get used to editing and cutting a lot of the things that you think that you want to have in there. Um, that's a very, again, organized approach to something. Whereas if it's a personal story, you're going to have a little bit more freedom. And I'll explain that as we run through again. So I'll show you exactly how this led to one of my better known books. What is something I know very well? Well, at the time, it was obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety. It was the predominant thing I was dealing with in my life at the time. So I knew right away I wanted to write about that. Who do I want to tell the story to? In that case, it was myself at 11 years old. I wanted to talk exactly to the kid at that age who didn't know what he was dealing with. Um, where is somewhere I know or somewhere I want to spend time? I said it at the actual school where I was at that time. Again, this was a very grounded approach. What kind of book do I feel like reading? What theme do I need? I knew that I always loved mystery, but I knew that I also needed something hopeful at the time because, I was struggling with it and I wanted a hopeful message about that theme. What is in my character's pocket on a Tuesday? I knew it was just some sort of utensil to write with. That was the nature. He always wanted to have something handy to be able to write. And my goal for that story, this is going to sound incredibly cliche, but it was really to just reach one single kid who needed to hear the story at the time. I always thought if this reached one person and elicited some hope or some communication, that would make it worthwhile. So those questions led me to write O.C. Daniel. That sort of became the framework of how I knew what I wanted to write. And of course, from there, the plot started coming together. But I do find maybe you won't use all of those questions, but if you are interested in writing something, I think asking yourself some of those is going to make you, is going to help guide you a little bit onto where you want to go and what you want to do, and to treat it seriously because, as we all know, it's a big commitment. So if you got to be passionate about it and you got to know who you want to tell it and why. So those are just some of the tips that I use when I'm doing my writing.
I forgot how to mute myself there. Okay. So one thing I did want to go ahead and just mention, so you saw that a poll question had come through about what would you rather write or where would you rather write essentially. So at sea, on land, at a coffee shop, or more of an illustrator. So the majority of folks on the call said on land, which I would have to agree with. Had 22% said at sea, which sounds
Nice.
very challenging. I'm not sure how anyone does that without feeling nauseous. And then we have some at a coffee shop, and we have some illustrators on this
Great.
call. So that's very exciting as well.
Yeah, writing at sea is about as it can be as interesting as it sounds, but once you get used to it and conquer your stomach, then it can be great because there's literally no distractions.
Yeah. Just change that. So moving on to our next question, and if anybody wants to pop their 6 things into the chat, feel free. As I was writing them down, I think that, well, I'm going to save the writing for the authors because my list basically was an Emily Henry title with the Taylor Swift soundtrack in the background. So not very original on
I don't
my
know. It
end.
sounds like
I'll
that.
leave
That's
it
got a
to
lot of
the
promise.
authors. All the authors on the here, yourself and all of the authors out there to write creative, wonderful stories. So the 5th question is ultimately, what do you hope readers and librarians are going to take away from the story?
Great question and so important. And I love, again, having this tied in. This really as my first school visit back then, and showed up to the first school ever, and there was readers wearing capes and dressed up as superheroes and supervillains, and that's kind of how I knew instantly it was definitely the right field for me, because it was just such a great scene. So good memories there. Um, as far as what they take away, yeah, I mean, I'm of course it's going to be personalized a little bit in terms of what you gravitate towards, because there's two main points here, which is a celebrating and again normalizing neurodiversity, in this case mosaic Down syndrome. I always want readers to think a little bit more about the people around them, to think about their stories, to just in general, um, again, not empathy, but to connect and to think a little bit more about each person's individualized journeys, especially in this case. Maybe the quiet people around them, or the people who are not taught always in the same classrooms, and to think a little bit more and to just realize that they're the exact same. Everyone's the human being is on this journey, and that these are just parts of their journey. And then of course the intergenerational friendship is sort of a huge aspect of this as well. um, I'm hoping readers, and with the encouragement of librarians, again, are going to think a little bit more about the older generations. They're going to want to reconnect and learn from grandparents and from that generation they may have contact with. I just think for myself, it was such an important aspect of growing up. Spent an absolute ton of time with grandparents, and again, visiting retirement homes. And I do think the more we can encourage readers, again, to connect with grandparents and to think about those friendships and their life experiences and garner some of that, it's just going to be a good thing in the long run. So, yeah, I mean, I think, of course, I want them to have a really fun mystery. I want them to laugh and cheer, and I want them to try and figure it out, and I want them to, um, again, have a great literary experience, but also in the end, think a little bit about those messages. And for um, librarians, just finding the right readers who might need it, of course. Anyone who feels left out, anyone who feels different, anyone who's trying to find their voice, I think is really going to connect with Benny and his story of growth here.
Totally. So now we're going to go to our speed rounds, Q&A. So some folks who may or may not be on here live sent some questions for you in prior to today's webinar. So the first question is, what made you choose Benny to have a disability? They said, I love the idea that Benny lives in the retirement home and makes friends with the residents, a really nice multi-generational friendship. So I know you touched on this a bit, but is there anything else you'd like to add to that as to why you chose Benny to have a disability or neurodiversity?
Yeah, I think the personal connection and learning a bit more about mosaic Down syndrome, I definitely, because it was something, I guess, contrary to my first question, it was something I didn't know very well, but something that I learned about and something that I saw more up close and personal. I thought this was such an interesting aspect to tell this story. And again, I knew that part of the theme and part of what I like to write about is these underrepresented voices and stories. And I think if we can make great, funny characters, smart characters like Benny, but who also have an aspect that we don't think about, or something that we maybe have a prejudice about, or in terms of, I guess in terms of generally what they always call a disability, and to sort of get away from that term, and to show that this is not stopping him from being a student just like them. So yeah, I mean, that was the main reason why I did that. And then setting the retirement home again was to celebrate sort of the relationships that I had. And in a very, very personal level, Mr. Tom being based off my Opa, who I lost, some years ago, this was a chance to kind of say goodbye again and to write something featuring him. And it was cathartic. I mean, the best kind of writing for people doing it is if you can find catharsis in it as well.
Yeah. So another question is, will students from the US be able to relate to the story? So unfamiliar phrases or references to Newfoundland. I'm learning something as we go along. So what is your take on how our US students would be able to relate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I put the sort of short glossary up front, which explains some of the more common terms in there and gives a little overview of what they mean. So some Newfoundland sayings to remember. Definitely that'd be good for some of the readers to go through initially. But I think that the central theme and the central setting of sort of rural communities, someone from an urban environment moving to a rural place, that sort of cultural immersion, I think that's still going to speak to readers everywhere. I think that there's really identifiable themes that are working through here. Um, all of that stuff is going to connect and relate to them. And I think the Newfoundland aspect will just be an interesting uh, connection. A lot of readers are probably going to be learning about Newfoundland for the first time. It will certainly be the first time they see some of these sayings. Um, but Newfoundland sort of does punch above its weight on the world stage. There's a very popular play called The Come From Away. Um, Obviously, Newfoundland and the U.S. have a real connection historically. So I think it'll be a fun um, aspect for them to work on some of their Newfoundland sayings and to learn some of the language. But the theme, the setting is going to feel really, really familiar with them. So I hope it's going to ground the story for them while they learn a bit about Newfoundland.
Nice. I think I remember, so I have a 13-year-old, and I want to say maybe last year or the year before there was a trend on YouTube and probably through social media of like sea shanties, like
That's
people
right. I did hear that.
were singing sea shanties. So I guess that's a
That's
good way.
right.
You can always play that familiar tune for kids as they're talking about the story. So
That's
um
absolutely right. Yeah.
yes, there was a trend for a while on
See,
that.
there you go.
I played a lot in our house. I was like, okay, this is
It
different,
could be
but it's
worse.
great. It's good. It's good. Um, so another question is, what is your goal for this novel in the school library space, and what do you hope the reader will do with the story? So I know, again, you touched upon this, but is there
Mm.
anything else you'd like to add to that question?
Yeah, again, always I hope it just spurs dialogue. If there's anything they're not familiar with or they don't quite understand or they want to talk more about, I mean, I love the idea of being in a library space and being able to ask questions and being able to open discussions about Down syndrome, about intergenerational friendships, about dealing with loss and grief. I mean, that's an aspect of this book as well that so many readers are going to have dealt with or will deal with. And hopefully, in a really human way, we're dealing with it here. And it's a very hopeful way, um, which is how it had always been presented in my case, from grandparents, this sort of hopeful aspect, this grateful aspect too sometimes. So I thought that was hopefully a good message in dealing with a lot of these really big themes that are in here. So always it's to spur discussion, it's to get readers thinking, and at the same time for them to just really be engaged in a mystery, because as we know, a good mystery really does keep readers flipping the pages and keep them guessing, and that's always important too, to keep them hooked.
Yeah. So the next question is how do you plan what clues get found and when? Do you start from the beginning, start from the end, and work backwards, or some other way? How do you keep track of what happens at what point in the book? Which is really interesting for a mystery. You got to keep a track of a lot of clues.
Yeah, I guess I'm revealing the secrets here, but I've never met a single mystery author who knew where the clues were supposed to go the first draft. That's very much a retroactive process a lot of the time. You seed things in throughout on your first drafts. Um, but the great part about a mystery is once you get there and once you know where you've ended up, then you can go back and seed retroactively through editing. And I always tell readers this in workshops is that editing is your great superpower as a writer. I mean, it's a lot of what we're presenting is the process of months or years of careful editing afterwards, and mystery, of course, being no exception. So yeah, that's a great point. uh, Once I get there, then I go back and start seeding, and that's of course why the clues are often perfectly put into the right place, right? Because you already know what's going to happen by that point and you're going back retroactively and doing it. And that's why I love mysteries in a sense, because um, well, you get to feel really smart because it's like I came up with that from the beginning and knew all that. But also the process of going back and building toward that answer, I just find really fun. It's like putting the pieces of a puzzle back out for people to read and guessing when they might start putting them together. I love speaking to readers and when do they start figuring out and when do they put the pieces together.
I love that. So I envision with mystery and thriller authors like a big board with index cards and red string.
That
So
I wish
is
that
that part
maybe
of
the
your
good
process?
ones.
No.
That's the good authors, I guess. Me, I'm just going back and thinking as I go from there. But yes, you certainly. I have actually seen people who big board it, when it gets truly, truly complex. And sometimes I also have to remember, of course, when writing for young readers, that you want to be complex, but you don't want it to be so, indecipherable that even when they solve it, it doesn't make sense. So it's also about stripping it back and like, here are the literal step-by-step process by how I got to this.
Yeah, I love that. So the next question is, how did you start your career as an author?
Oh yeah, I guess we didn't really touch on that on a very specific sense. Uh, I knew I wanted to write, but I was horrified or terrified rather of sharing my writing with anybody. So there was actually a teacher who gave me the encouragement to actually start sharing my writing. This was in grade 12 of high school. That process of being able to share that writing a few times and deal with, I guess, the reactions and the nerves of sharing it, that led me to considering it. The Vindico I came up with in a workshop at Carleton University. It was an idea. I moved back home after university. My parents were thrilled. Of course, I came back with my degree and said I wanted to write a book about supervillains and was sleeping on their couch, and luckily it worked out. But in a very, very literal sense, once I wrote that draft, I was rejected by 24 agents before I got an agent, and by 11 publishers before I got a publisher. So there was a huge process of rejection and going through all that. Um, and once I got there, I think maybe mentally thought that you just write a book and, it becomes Harry Potter and everything's grand. So it was a big learning process at 22. But I think that's such an important part to remember is anyone who has published a book has probably been rejected 10, 20, 30 times. And I'd have these letters stacked up and sort of every day open an envelope and put it down. So one of the biggest parts of becoming an author is just, stubborn, dogged persistence that I want to do this and I want to get this story out. And I think that's sometimes where a lot of great stories get lost, is in that process of rejection. So stick to it, if you want to get your story out there.
Yeah, good advice. So what advice would you give to young writers? So middle school, even elementary school kids that have these stories that they want to put out there. Do you have advice to young writers or even young adults that are looking to go into writing?
Yeah, I think, I parrot the main advice, which of course is read and read a ton. And that's always that sort of famous advice that if you want to write, read twice as much. Um, but also when I'm talking with young writers, it's always very much encouraging them to write what they know, to use the perspective and voice they have, and to oftentimes target their own generation. I always say, if you're an 11-year-old writing, your fellow 11-year-olds much better than I do. If you can write for them and write with that voice, that's going to be great to help find your readership and just to encourage them as well. Put your experiences in and put what you know and love into a story. And the main thing I always tell them is to just not worry about the results. Don't worry if it doesn't sound right. Don't worry. I tell them all the time, my first drafts are terrible. You would never think a writer put them together. It's okay though. It's the process. It's the joy of editing, and not to make it about how good your work is. It's just, did you enjoy doing it? Did you say what you wanted to say? And then can I help you say it a little more clearly if you want to share it?
Yeah, good advice to young writers. So I think we might have time. I don't know, Hannah, if there's any questions in the chat. We might have time for one question there, if there is any.
I'd say no questions yet, but please feel free to put them in the chat.
Okay. So as we wait to see if there's any questions that come through, Wesley, you want to share your website, anything that you're working on that you want our, librarians and educators on this call to hear about?
Sure, yeah. So my website, which has the contact form, if there's any questions or feedback or anything like that, would just be wesleytking.com. Wesley T as in Tom King.com. Again, that has a contact form which will come right through to my email address. So I do always love hearing from readers and educators and librarians about feedback or ideas, or just sometimes even just stories of a reader who connected with something that really, lifts an author's heart on a dark day when we hear, because of course you're seeing more directly. I don't always get to do as many events as I used to, though. October we'll be doing a pretty big run of festivals, so it'll be nice to see readers again, and bringing Benny actually to the Hong Kong Literary Festival to confuse a whole different area with Newfoundland sayings as well. So in terms of what to keep an eye on, I have a very exciting partially illustrated chapter book series coming out next May. It's called Beast Ballers. It's monsters, it's basketball, it's very humor, I think very Diary of a Wimpy Kid, illustrated by the great Steve Wolfhard. So that's a really fun one. I think that's going to be great for your reluctant readers. And then the fall, I have my adult debut, which is the supernatural thriller called Wolf Season 2. So for some of my first time writing an adult novel, and happy to share that as well. And there's actually 3 more books on the way in later years too, but for next year, those will be the 2 releases.
Awesome. Okay, so I don't know if we have any other questions. Did any questions come through before we wrap up?
No, there have not been.
We covered them.
Yep, we
All right,
did.
covered everything.
We covered
All right.
everything.
Well, I wanted to thank everyone for coming today, especially Wesley for spending time with us. This was amazing to hear about your process, your characters, your setting. I learned a lot. I learned how to say Newfoundland correctly now. So that was my big takeaway for today, but we really appreciate being here. For everyone that has joined, there is going to be a recording of this that will be available sometime next week. I think we'll send that out to everyone that registered. It'll also be on our website, the Junior Library Guild website, and our YouTube channel. I did want to remind you that Benny on the Case, that was featured in our August subscription box for adventure mystery for elementary customers, and I believe you can still get a copy of it on the JLG website. So if you're interested, it didn't come in your box, but you heard today's talk and you really want to get a copy of it, do go to the website. I think we still have some available. So thank you again, Wesley. We appreciate it, and thanks everyone.
Thank you.